Today's topic is
movie theaters in China versus movie theaters in the West.
So where are we going today, Sea-Milk?
Well, since the topic today is movie theaters, I figured we'd go to a movie theater. But I have to ask you this, why are we in the car today?
Well, the only place where you can go to a nice movie theater in the city is in an area where motorcycles are banned. And if we were to ride our motorcycles in there, the police would probably take them away, or at the very least give us a fine or some sort of trouble. So I thought, may as well take my rubbish little car.
No dramatic police chases for you today, guys, sorry.
Yeah, apologize. So there's a big difference between movie theaters in the West and in China, and we're going to try and go over a couple of them today. Hopefully we can cover quite a lot. So maybe you can start with the snacks.
One of the most staple things that you associate with going to the cinema back home is to eat salty buttered popcorn. Get a big bag, overpriced, but man, it's really good and it just kind of goes with the whole experience. But in China, it's quite a bit different.
Yeah, I mean, I actually can't go to the movie theater without having popcorn, to be honest. But in China, I can, because it's all sweet. And I've never, ever come across salty popcorn in China.
Never once.
Yeah. It's always that sort of caramelized, or I suppose you'd say caramelized, right? Sort of sweet, weird.
It's actually
stuff.
the American English word for that is called kettle corn. So we get kettle corn here in China, but we don't get actual regular normal popcorn. There's also those little things that look like packing peanuts that people get. Kind of a crisped up corn, maybe rice snack. It's not very good.
No, it's kind of like cheesy poofs or whatever.
Yeah, without the cheese.
Without the cheese, yeah. So flavorless, really.
Yeah. So the funny thing about cinemas in China, or movie theaters, is that they only get 20 releases of foreign films every year. And it's kind of strange because Chinese people typically prefer Western films. I mean, the Hollywood budget for these big blockbusters is quite a bit higher than Chinese films get, so the production value is quite a bit higher as well. And China is seen just going to the cinema as a huge hobby. It's like a big pastime for people nowadays.
Sure.
But the limited release of films every year means that they only get to, the Chinese government picks and chooses between which films they actually want to show.
Well, you know why they do that, obviously, is to basically boost the homegrown the homegrown movie market,
right,
and allow the homegrown movies a chance. Because if you're just putting out Hollywood movies, nobody would see the local releases.
Exactly. I mean, that's the full truth, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely.
There's a word of a new pact that's going to allow the West to release 14 extra films per year here, but it's only under the agreement that they'll be released in IMAX movie theaters. I've heard that China had acquired IMAX, this company, so I think they're trying to promote those movie theaters. Even a small city like this, I think we have 2 or 3 of those IMAX theaters.
Sure.
It's a pretty big deal here.
Yeah. Now, although you've got 20 releases of Hollywood movies every year, there's this weird thing that happens in China, which is basically box office fixing.
Okay.
And what they do is, in order to boost the sales and boost the prestige of homegrown movies, they will very often give out fake tickets. So it's happened to me once before. I went to go and watch a movie, and I got a movie ticket for, what was it? It was, I think, one of the Bourne movies.
Okay.
But they gave me a ticket for a Chinese movie, and they just crossed out the name and written in the name Bourne whatever on there. And I was quite perplexed by this, and I thought maybe they just run out of tickets or something.
Right.
But I later found out that this is a little trick that they do in order to boost the box office stats of the local movies. So
all right.
If you look at the overall stats, they'll say that this Chinese movie, I think Monster Hunter was a very good example of that Monster Hunter did really well and beat out all the Hollywood movies in the local homegrown market. But actually, the only reason they beat out the the Hollywood movies is because they'd falsified ticket sales and given away a whole lot of free tickets to pensioners and things like that, just to basically make it look like it sold well.
That's really interesting, because I actually went to go see that Monster Hunter film based on the fact that it was doing so well. I had usually not seen a domestic film perform so well in the theaters, and I was like, wow, maybe this is all right. And I went to go see it, and I really, really disliked it. It was a pretty terrible movie.
Makes sense. So, Sea-Milk, there are quite a few things that really annoy me when I go to a movie theater here in China, but maybe you can explain to all of our audience out there what these things are.
I think I know exactly what you're talking about. Now, if you go to most movie theaters in the West, you'll notice that they'll say, please turn off your cell phone, please refrain from talking, please don't throw stuff on the floor. Now, they have the exact same little cartoons in the beginning of every movie here. but it seems like the general populace seems to ignore them. I think 90% of the time I've gone to the cinema here in China, I have to speak to people around me who answer their phones and speak very loudly on them, very selfishly. And I lose my temper and I yell at them. No one else does. No one else seems to be getting angry except for me. And it's incredibly annoying. Also, just eating loudly and throwing seeds of sunflower seeds in the floor.
All right, if they eat guadza, yeah, it's a pet peeve of mine.
Stepping on them all the time. You know?
Yeah, and that.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Well, you're talking about that. I have to say that nowadays, especially with WeChat, it's the Chinese WhatsApp. I was in the theater the other day and a teenager next to me just wouldn't stop reading her WeChat, and the light from the screen was so distracting. I had to ask her 5 times to please turn her phone off.
Sure.
Because you're in a dark cinema and this bright light of a big, LCD, well, big screen from a smartphone is really, really frustrating.
Right. Might be a cultural thing, but I've seen a lot of parents kind of neglecting their children at restaurants and movie theaters alike, where they won't reprimand them for making noise or running around. So you'll get kids running past your knees all the time and being noisy and kind of terrorizing the movie theater, sometimes running up in front of the screen. I've seen.
Yeah.
It's incredibly annoying.
Yeah, so the etiquette still has a long way to go here when it comes to movie etiquette.
For sure. Now, of course, China being the country that it is, everyone knows about the censorship of the internet, but also every foreign film that is released here as well is typically censored.
Yeah, that's absolutely right. Obviously, if there's anything that paints China in a bad light, it will be removed. In fact, the movie is usually just not allowed to be released. But if it's a very popular film like Pirates of the Caribbean, I can't remember which one, number 3 or number 2, it had that Hong Kong actor Chow Yun-fat in it, and his whole dialogue was taken out of the film. In fact, he only appears in the film for about 2 minutes, whereas in the original film he appears for about 20 minutes in the film.
Was there any reasoning?
Well, he said some or other Chinese poem, and I think that they didn't like the fact that they were painting a Chinese person as being a pirate. Maybe as a bad man or something. So I'm not going to pretend to understand the politics behind it, but they basically just said, not good enough, cut all of his lines out. And so it was. I went to watch it here in the cinema, and I didn't understand what was going on, because he appeared for a minute and then he was kind of out of the movie, and what's going on,
Interesting.
Yeah.
On the flip side of that, censorship is about removing things from movies, but now a lot of Hollywood film companies are adding in things about China in a positive light to actually get the ticket to be allowed to be in China, be shown in China. So you'll see a lot of very strange scenes where they'll have Chinese branded cell phones, or Chinese people, random Chinese actors thrown in there for a cameo, or maybe one of the action scenes will take place in Shanghai or something.
Right.
Just to be able to be released here in China. I find that pretty interesting, how China is actually, their quota is swaying what movies get released here, and people are actually pandering to that.
Sure. We can take Transformers as an example, the latest one.
Right.
Not only did they have a lot of scenes shot in China, but they had like Chinese products being advertised.
Right.
They put whole scenes dedicated to that guy drinking that stupid milk or whatever.
Yeah.
And it's quite ridiculous, but Transformers is probably the most popular franchise of movies in China ever, I think.
I think that needs to be touched upon, because I don't think you guys can understand how popular Transformers is.
Yeah,
here.
It's ridiculous.
You've seen Transformers kind of just suck every Chinese person into it. Like it's a new world for them. Kind of like we look up to Star Wars as this grand universe. They look to Transformers. It's weird. It doesn't have the staying power back home as it does for us, but they love it here.
Absolutely. I actually asked why people like Transformers that much, and according to one of my clients, the Transformers cartoon was one of the only cartoons ever shown during this sort of 80s here in China. One of the only foreign cartoons.
Sure.
So they obviously have a lot of fondness for it.
Wow.
Anyway.
Transformers is super popular, but there's also some other franchises that really blew up here, and I found there's kind of a trend in what becomes popular here from the West, and it's usually just big, huge action films.
Sure. Avatar, that was massive. What else?
Avatar, the Mission Impossible series did really well here. Also, they incorporated a lot of Chinese stuff in there, so I think that's why that was released.
Sure. Let's also talk about some other movies that were incredibly popular in China, and they weren't actually ever released in the cinema. They were just watched, pirated and watched online. But Titanic is massive here.
Right.
Another one is Forrest Gump.
Forrest Gump, yeah.
Everybody knows Forrest Gump.
Right. Oh God, they quote it all the time, don't
Yeah,
they? Life is like
absolutely.
a box of chocolates. You hear that everywhere.
Yeah, Argan Xian or something.
Is that what
So,
it is?
yeah, whatever. Yeah. In fact, funny story. There's a guy opened a thing called Forrest Gump English near where I
What?
live. Yeah, and he wears that like Forrest Gump hat and everything, and he walks around and.
You gotta
It's
be
called-
kidding
No,
me.
seriously, it's called Forrest Gump English.
What?
And he had like a thriving trade. He's a very old American guy. He must have been in his 60s. And well, he had it's in like a massive big building, Book City, in the middle of the center, and he's got his own floor almost, and it's Forrest Gump English. Anyway, right, Sea-Milk, looks like we're arriving at our destination. How about we get out and do a little bit of a walk and talk?
Sounds good.
I think we've pretty much said everything that needs to be said in the car, except maybe prices. A normal movie ticket goes anywhere between 60 and 120 RMB, depending on if it's 3D or not. So, what, somewhere between 5 and 20 US dollars max? So, Sea-Milk, what's our comment question today?
Today's comment question comes from Menko, M-E-N-K-O, and he asks, how permeating is the cigarette culture in China, and do you think it will go away with the new generation? I think this is in reference to if you wanted to move here, do you have to smoke?
Smoking is still rampant. It's everywhere. It's in every social gathering. If it's business or just social, they're going to offer you cigarettes. It's here to stay for a very, very long time. Although the attitude towards smoking has changed and people are starting to shun it. What do you think?
When I first came here, you couldn't turn down a cigarette without being rude. Nowadays, I think you can say no and no one's feelings will be hurt. So I think it is changing with the younger generation.
Absolutely. So anyway, there's a good bunch of youngsters nowadays who don't like to smoke, but in general, if somebody's over the age of 30, they're smoking for sure, 99%. And it's a huge cause of death every year. Yeah, anyway, hope that answered your question. What do you say we get out of here?
Yeah, sounds good.
Cool, let's go. So, Sea-Milk, it's time for us to wrap up this episode. Do you have anything else you want to tell our subscribers out there before we finish?
Thanks for watching us this time. We'll catch you on the next one.
You forgot to add your little subscribe beg thing.
Thank you for liking, commenting, and subscribing.
Right. And if you didn't like, comment, or subscribe, remember, as always, guys, stay awesome.